Good day, beautiful people. Today we will take a look at your renal physiology, okay, or your kidney physiology. Please note that the function of your urine or the main function of your kidneys is the urine formation. Okay, your urine formation involves plasma filtration at the glomerulus and then followed by tubular reabsorption and secretion in the renal tubules. So please note that these processes, this glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, and tubular secretion remove metabolic wastes, regulate water, electrolytes, and also acid-base balance. With that being said, as the functions of your kidneys determine which substances the body retains or excretes. Again, the kidneys, they have the ability to determine which substances will they retain, which will be excreted. Okay? And filtration for your glomerular filtration as function of the kidney, that is, your water and solutes in the blood leave the vascular space and enter the lumen of the nephron, or they go into your Bowman's space. And of course, your tubular secretion, that is a mechanism by which substances will move from the epithelial cells of the tubules into the lumen of the tubules accordingly. Usually after uptake from the surrounding interstitium and capillaries. Your tubular reabsorption here is a mechanism wherein the substances move from the tubular lumen across the epithelium going into the interstitium and surrounding capillaries. So, your renal physiology or your kidney functions, okay, are glomerular filtration, tubular reabsorption, and tubular secretion accordingly. On to these three processes or three functions. Let's first take a look at your renal blood flow. Your kidneys accordingly receive 25% of the cardiac output. They receive 25% of the cardiac output. And yes, your kidneys, they process approximately 180,000 ml of filtered plasma per day. Okay? Yes, your total renal blood flow is approximately 1,200 ml per minute. 1,200 ml per minute. And yes, since we are talking about blood here kasi, we are talking about blood in your renal blood flow. And please note that your blood, it is made of cells and then cells and the plasma. Okay, and your total renal plasma flow ranges from 600 to 700 ml per minute. Okay, total renal plasma flow. Okay. And yes, again, please note that your kidneys process about 125 ml per minute of plasma every day, or that is equal to 180,000 ml of filtered plasma per day. Okay, and yes, your final urine output is approximately 1% of the filtered plasma volume. That is approximately, or it ranges from the urine volume, ranges from 600 to 180 ml, and that is 1% of the filtered plasma volume. Okay, since we are talking about urine here, the largest component of urine is water. Again, the largest component of urine is water. But then there are solutes present in the urine. Examples of the solutes or dissolved substances present in the urine, you have urea, chloride, sodium and potassium. You also have phosphate, sulfate, creatinine, and uric acid. Other substances which are initially present in the ultrafiltrate, like glucose, bicarbonate, and albumin, they are essentially completely reabsorbed by the tubules. Okay, this again, this glucose, this bicarbonate, and albumin, they are filtered, and yes, they are filtered and they are present in the ultrafiltrate. But then, as they move through the tubules, these substances are reabsorbed. Okay, the substances are reabsorbed. So, when we talk about the normal urine of an individual, of a healthy individual, glucose, bicarbonate, and albumin, they are absent in a normal urine of a healthy individual. Okay, or they they does not the urine of a healthy individual does not contain a significant amount of glucose, bicarbonate, and albumin accordingly. Arteriole divides to give rise to your glomerulus. And yes, of course, your afferent arteriole supplies the glomerulus with blood supply, or it supplies the glomerulus with blood. And yes, your glomerulus, okay, will converge to form your afferent arterioles. Of course, your glomerulus will move outside of the renal corpuscle, yeah, and then converge to form your efferent arterioles. Please note that your efferent arterioles branches to form two capillary plexus. And yes, these two capillary plexus is determined by the type of nephron the afferent arteriole services. Okay, for your outer cortical nephrons, they have short loops of Henle. Okay, and so if you try to go over the images I presented to you last time, the cortical nephrons, they have short loops of Henle. And yes, the afferent arteriole branches into a finer capillary network known as your peritubular capillaries. Okay, your efferent arteriole will branch out to give rise to your peritubular capillaries. And yes, of course, these peritubular capillaries, they encompass or they encircle the outer cortical tubules entirety. They encompass your proximal convoluted tubule as such. Okay, and of course, the mid deep juxtamedullary nephrons, they have long loops of Henle. Your juxtamedullary nephrons, they have long loops of Henle. And yes, your efferent arteriole will branch out to what we call this, to form your vasa recta. Okay, your vasa recta here, it what you call this, it covers your loops of Henle accordingly. Your peritubular capillaries and your vasa recta, both of these, they branch out from your efferent arterioles. Please note that you have two types of nephrons. You have a cortical nephron that is found mostly in the outer cortex of the kidney. Of course, you have here your cortical nephron. Cortical nephron, it has a short loop of Henle. Okay, it is found mostly in the outer cortex or in the cortex of the kidney. Okay, and yes, your peritubular capillaries, it surrounds your proximal and distal convoluted tubules of your cortical nephrons. Again, your peritubular capillaries surrounds, okay, you have your peritubular capillaries. You have here, these are peritubular capillaries. Your peritubular capillaries, they surround the proximal and distal convoluted tubules. And yes, this cortical nephrons, accordingly, they function for reabsorption and secretion. You have here your peritubular capillaries also. Okay, please note that the close relationship of your peritubular capillaries and the renal tubules, it enables the sequential processing and exchange of solutes between the lumen or between the lumen fluid or the ultrafiltrate and the bloodstream throughout the nephron. Okay, please note they have a close relationship. They encompass, they encircle your distal and proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, and so same also here, you have what you call this peritubular capillaries that encircle or encompass your PCT and DCT. Okay, moving on, you have this juxtamedullary nephron. Your juxtamedullary nephron, they are situated near the corticomedullary junction. Okay, and they have long loops of Henle. You compare. Okay, they have long loops of Henle extending deep into the medulla. Okay, and so deep into the medulla, it is actually near, no? If you try to take a look at this picture, they're actually near the tip of the renal pyramid. Okay, because this part is already the what you call this. This is already your area cribrosa. Okay, and so yes, your juxtamedullary nephron, they are located near the cortico. This is the cortico-medullary junction, and again, they have long loops of Henle. If you were asked during the quiz, which of the what? Okay, and so which nephron has a long loop of Henle? Of course, you have your juxtamedullary nephron. And yes, your peritubular capillaries, please note, peritubular capillaries, they are look they encompass, okay? They encompass the portions of the cortical portions of the nephron. Kasi tignan mo ito, there is a proximal convoluted tubule and then distal convoluted sorry, you have a distal convoluted tubule. Okay, you have this is a proximal convoluted tubule, and then you have your distal convoluted tubule here. Please note that your peritubular capillaries, they surround your cortical portions of your juxtamedullary nephron. While of course, your vasa recta, sabi natin kanina, your vasa recta surrounds your long loops of Henle. Okay, you have here your vasa recta. These are your vasa recta accordingly. Your vasa recta, these are long, straight capillaries that parallel the loop of Henle in the medulla. Okay, your vasa recta here is what we call this important in maintaining the medullary osmotic gradient. And yes, it is also important in concentrating urine by countercurrent exchange. This countercurrent mechanism is will be we will take a look at this one, this countercurrent mechanism as we move through. Okay, and so that is for your vasa recta, your peritubular capillaries, your cortical nephron, and then your juxtamedullary nephron. Okay, and so please note in your cortical nephron, there is still vasa recta. Okay, there are still vasa recta present. Please note that in almost every organ, there is what they call is the site. There is a site of entry of blood vessels, nerves, and lymph. Okay, and so as for the kidney, you have your renal hilum. That is the site of entry of your renal vein and renal artery. Of course, your renal artery, it supplies the kidney with oxygenated blood. And of course, your renal vein, it drains your the blood from the kidney. Okay, your renal artery will branch to form your segmental artery, and then to your lobar artery, then to your arcuate arteries, and then to your interlobular artery. Okay, your interlobular artery, of course, will give rise to your afferent arteriole. Okay, it will give rise to your afferent arteriole, then it will give rise to your glomerulus. This glomerulus is a capillary. But then please note that what you call this exchange of gases, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, or exchange of nutrients does not take place in the glomerulus. Accordingly, exchange of nutrients, exchange of gases, exchange of carbon dioxide takes place in the terminal part of your arterial or your arteriolar system and the proximal part of the venular venous system. Or simply, it is in the second capillary plexus. It takes place in your vasa recta. Okay, it takes place in the vasa recta accordingly. The function of your, what you call this, the function of your glomerulus is for filtration. It is not for exchange of gases, exchange of nutrients accordingly. Okay, please note that what they call this, the blood supply to the kidneys actually is unique. Okay, and so because normally, di ba, okay, normally from an arteriole going to a capillary and then veins, into your venule, then veins, and then your large veins. But then, in the kidneys kasi, and the kidneys, from an arteriole, it will divide to form a capillary plexus, your glomerulus, and then it will form an arteriole again. And this arteriole will again subdivide to form another capillary plexus. And that second capillary plexus, please note that that is the site of exchange of gases. Okay, exchange of oxygen and exchange of gases. Okay, please note that the blood supply to the kidneys, it is unique accordingly. And yes, from your afferent arterioles, again, peritubular capillaries or vasa recta will arise, and this peritubular or vasa recta will converge to form finally your vein. Okay, and then to your arcuate vein, to your interlobar vein, and then to your renal vein. Renal vein, of course, will go back to the heart. Of course, in what you call this, in relation to the function of the kidney as a filtering organ, okay, a blood that enters the kidney is not clean somewhat. Okay, it's not clean. Okay, blood leaving the kidneys, they are clean accordingly. Okay, blood leaving the kidneys, they are clean of metabolites accordingly. You have your glomerular filtration. Please note that your glomerular filtration here, this is the first process in urine formation. Again, it is the first process in urine formation. Okay, and so you filter. Please note, you filter. If you know what filter, what if you know the mechanism of filtering, then probably you already have an idea of your glomerular filtration. Okay, your glomerulus is a non-selective filter of plasma substances with molecular weights less than 70,000 Daltons. Okay, it is a non-selective filter of plasma substances with molecular weights of less than 70,000 Daltons. Meaning, if if the molecule or the substance is less than 70,000 Daltons, it can pass through the glomerulus. It can pass through. What if it is greater than 70,000? It will remain inside the glomerulus. Okay, if the molecular weight is greater than 70,000, it will remain inside the glomerulus. Okay, your glomerulus, it forms a barrier designed for plasma ultrafiltration. Okay, of course. Okay, and yes, your glomerular filtration barrier is permeable to water and low molecular weight solute. Okay, it's permeable to water and low molecular weight solutes like smaller substances, of course. Okay, please note that your proteins equal to or smaller than albumin because accordingly, your albumin, it has a molecular weight of less than 70,000 Daltons. Okay, proteins equal to or smaller than albumin may pass through in tiny amounts or in small amounts accordingly. But then, proteins larger than albumin, like your globulins, they are large molecules. Also, your fibrinogen is a large molecule also. These proteins, these large proteins, they are too big to cross the filter. And yes, they are retained in the blood. are the components of your glomerular filtration barrier? First is your fenestrated endothelium. Please note that your glomerulus, it is a capillary. And yes, what type of capillary? It is a fenestrated type of capillary. And yes, it has pores. It has fenestrations. Okay, the fenestrated endothelium or the fenestrations of the endothelium of your glomerulus has large open pores that ranges from 50 nanometers to 100 nanometers in diameter. Okay, yes, and aside from that, aside from the pores or aside from the fenestrations, your glomerular or your glomerulus, it possesses, or the capillary endothelium of the glomerulus possesses a negatively charged coating. And yes, this negatively charged coating repels anionic molecules. What does it mean? It repels anionic molecules. It restricts anionic molecules. What does anionic mean? They are negatively charged particles. So, the capillary endothelium restricts negatively charged substances. Okay, meaning they are retained inside the glomerulus. Okay, they are retained inside the glomerulus. Again, negatively charged or anionic molecules, they are restricted, they are repelled by the negatively charged coating of your glomerulus or of your glomerular endothelium. Okay, of course, your positively charged substances, okay, they can pass through. Your positively charged substances, they can pass through accordingly. Okay. Earlier, I said that your glomerulus is a non-selective sieve, no? But then please note that the size of the pores, the size of the fenestrates, or the size of the pores, and the negative charge of the endothelium, it plays an important role in the solute selectivity during plasma ultrafiltration. Okay, and so yes, again, the size of the pores and the negative charge of the endothelium, they play an important role in solute selectivity during plasma ultrafiltration. Of course, aside from your fenestrated endothelium, part of your glomerular filtration barrier are actually the glomerular basement membrane and the podocytes that we will take as we move. We'll take a look as we move your glomerular basement membrane. Please note your GBM, it has three layers. You have the lamina rara interna that lies adjacent to the capillary endothelium. It lies next to your capillary endothelium. And then you have your lamina densa that is located in the middle or central, and then or at the center, centrally located. And then your lamina rara externa, which is adjacent to the epithelium of the Bowman's space, or just located above your visceral epithelium. Please note that glomerular basement membrane is absent between the capillary endothelium and the supporting mesangium. Okay, and so it is absent between the capillary endothelium and the supporting mesangium. And yes, your glomerular basement membrane contributes to the permeability characteristic of the filtration barrier. How? Okay, you go back to the components or the composition of your glomerular basement membrane. Okay, please note that your GBM is composed principally of collagenous and non-collagenous proteins. And yes, the basement membrane of your glomerular filtration barrier is a matrix with hydrated interstices. Accordingly, you have your nonpolar collagenous components are concentrated in the lamina densa, and an important polar non-collagenous component of heparan sulfate. Your heparan sulfate is a polyanionic proteoglycan. Okay, if you try to remember again, you have your your glycosaminoglycans, as what I've said last time in the other video. Okay, this non-collagenous component, your heparan sulfate, is located in the outer lamina rara layers. Okay, they are located in the outer lamina rara layers, and yes, this the presence of your heparan sulfate or your glycosaminoglycans in the outer lamina rara layers, it provides this layer with a strongly anionic character. Okay, it has a negative charge. Okay, it has a negative charge, and yes, please note, again, going back to what we said earlier about negative charge, it will repel negatively charged substances. It will repel negatively charged substances po. Okay? That is for your glomerular basement membrane of your podocytes, they constitute the third component of the filtration barrier. The podocyte means foot cell, and it relates to their foot-like appearance when viewed in cross section accordingly. Please note that the podocytes completely cover the glomerular capillaries with extending finger-like processes. Okay, back to when we talk about your podocytes, they have primary processes and then secondary processes that interdigitates with neighboring podocyte. Okay, their processes accordingly, the processes of these podocytes do not touch each other. The processes do not touch each other. And yes, there is a consistent space of 20 to 30 nanometers separating these processes, these finger-like processes. Okay, since there is what we call this a consistent space and the processes do not touch each other, it forms a snake-like channel that zigzags across the surface of the glomerular capillaries. Okay, I showed you this snake-like channel last time. And please note that this snake-like channel is called as the filtration slit. Your filtration slit covers only 3% of your total glomerular basement membrane area. Okay, please note your filtration slit is lined with distinct extracellular structure known as your slit diaphragm. Your filtration slit is lined by slit diaphragm. And please note that your slit diaphragm, it consists of regularly arranged subunits within the rectangular open spaces about the size of an albumin molecule. Okay, it has irregularly arranged subunit with rectangular open spaces about the size of an albumin molecule. Okay, that is for your podocyte. And yes, your podocyte, aside from that, aside from it has the filtrate, it forms the filtration slits, and the filtration slit is lined by your slit diaphragm, which has a rectangular open spaces about the size of an albumin molecule. Your podocytes, they phagocytose macromolecules that are unable to proceed through the slit diaphragm or return to the capillary lumen, meaning the phagocytose trapped macromolecules within their vicinity. Okay? And so, yes, please note that each component of your glomerular filtration barrier maintains an anionic charge on its cellular surface. And yes, each component of your glomerular filtration barrier is important for the proper functioning of the filtration barrier. Your criteria to pass through the glomerular filtration barrier. First is molecular size. Please note that water and small molecules or solutes rapidly pass through or diffuse through the filtration barrier with little or no resistance. Okay, in contrast to your larger plasma molecules, they must overcome the negative charge present on the endothelium. And aside from that, since they are large plasma molecules, they must be able to pass through the endothelial pores, which are 50 to 100 nanometers in diameter, as what we said earlier. Okay, next criteria is the molecular or electric charge. Okay, electric charge or electrical charge. Please note that your endothelium has this shield of negativity. This shield of negativity, or the negative charge of the endothelium, successfully repels most plasma proteins. So yes, even so, if the plasma protein has p- is the plasma protein is small enough to pass through the 50 to 100 nanometers in diameter of the pores, please note that you have the shield of negativity. They must overcome the shield of negativity. Okay, because the shield of negativity, it repels negatively charged substances. Okay, please note that most of your plasma proteins, they are negatively charged in nature. They are negative charge at the pH of blood. So yes, okay, most plasma proteins are prevented. Okay, they are retained inside the glomerulus, preventing the filtration barrier from becoming congested with plasma proteins. Okay, and and yes, please note, neutral and cationic molecules readily pass through the filtration barrier if they do not if they do not exceed the size restriction imposed by your basement membrane, which is a molecular radius of less than 4 nanometers. Okay? Again, molecular radius of less than 4 nanometers is required to pass through the basement membrane. And even if you have a neutral charge or cationic charge, okay? But even if you have a neutral or cationic charge, but you have exceeded the molecular radius of less than 4 mm, let's say the molecular radius of the substance is 10 mm, it will still, okay, will not pass through the glomerular filtration barrier. Okay, this molecular radius of less than 4 nanometers is imposed by your glomerular basement membrane. Please note that the filtered substances or the filtered plasma is, okay, is catched in your Bowman's space. Okay, this is actually your Bowman's space. The filtered plasma, okay, and so is catched in your Bowman's space. So, the initial ultrafiltrate in the Bowman's space, it does not contain blood cells, plasma proteins, and plasma proteins greater than albumin. Okay, it does not contain blood cells and plasma proteins that is greater than albumin. Cellular pressure, please note that this one is important in the filtration process. Okay, your larger lumen of the afferent arterioles allows for high hydrostatic pressure at the glomerulus, and you call that as glomerular hydrostatic pressure. This pressure averages 55 millimeters of mercury. This 55 millimeters of mercury is approximately half of the mean arterial blood pressure, and this is the driving force behind the glomerular filtration, because it will actually push through the fluid. It will push the fluid through the glomerular or the filtration barrier. It will push this glomerular hydrostatic pressure will push the fluid through the glomerular filtration barrier. Okay, please note that all other capillary beds, they have a narrower lumen, which causes greater resistance to blood flow and consequently low blood pressure within them accordingly. Okay, first, of course, you have your glomerular hydrostatic pressure, but then you also have a pressure that is exerted by the ultrafiltrate that is present in the Bowman's space or in the Bowman's capsule, and you call that as capsular hydrostatic pressure. It is your capsular hydrostatic pressure. This ultrafiltrate that is present in the Bowman's capsule exerts your capsular hydrostatic pressure, and it opposes the filtration process. It opposes the filtration process. Please note that it has a pressure of 55 millimeters of mercury. Your capsular hydrostatic pressure is 15 millimeters of mercury. Please note it's 15 millimeters of mercury. Okay? Also this pressure that also opposes your glomerular hydrostatic pressure, and you call that as your oncotic pressure. Your oncotic pressure, this one is the pressure exerted by higher plasma protein concentration. Please note again that your oncotic pressure is a pressure that is it is actually an osmotic pressure that is generated by large plasma proteins that cannot easily cross capillary walls. Okay, it is a what you call this pressure coming from your plasma proteins. Okay, your oncotic pressure it also opposes your what they call this it also opposes your glomerular hydrostatic pressure. Your oncotic pressure is 30 millimeters of mercury. Kasi in this oncotic pressure, your plasma protein, it will somewhat attract. Okay, it will somewhat attract, it will keep, okay, it will somewhat keep the fluid within them. Ganun po kasi. Okay, and so your oncotic pressure is it will oppose your glomerular hydrostatic pressure. It has a pressure of 30 millimeters of mercury. So with this, it has a, I mean, so if you try to do the math, your glomerular filtration, sorry, your glomerular hydrostatic pressure is 55 millimeters of mercury. You subtract the opposing pressures, 15 from your capsular hydrostatic pressure and then 30 from your oncotic pressure, it will give you a net filtration pressure of 10 millimeters of mercury. This net filtration pressure here will favor plasma filtration. It favors the filtration of plasma. Here actually an illustration. Please note you have your afferent arteriole. And yes, the glomerular hydrostatic blood pressure is 55 millimeters of mercury. That will push through. It will push the liquid. It will push the fluid out of the filter. Okay, of course, the yellow here is your Bowman space. Okay, it is your Bowman space. Of course, it will push through. What are your opposing your opposing pressures? You have your capsular hydrostatic pressure, which is exerted by the fluid present. Of course, this capsular hydrostatic pressure, the fluid, they want to return to the blood. They want to return to the lumen or to the blood. Okay, and that is 15 millimeters of mercury. And then your blood colloid osmotic pressure, or that is your blood oncotic pressure, that is your oncotic pressure, it is the pressure exerted by the plasma proteins present inside the glomerulus. Okay, and so of course, they want to hold water. They want to hold, okay, they attract fluid. Okay, and so proteins attract fluid. Okay, and the pressure is 30 millimeters of mercury. So if you try to do the math to get your net filtration pressure, you subtract capsular hydrostatic pressure and oncotic pressure, giving you 10 millimeters of mercury. That is actually your net filtration pressure. It favors the filtration process. To your tubular reabsorption and tubular secretion, let's take a look first at your juxtaglomerular apparatus. Okay, your juxtaglomerular apparatus is located in the vascular pole. It is located in the vascular pole, and yes, your juxtaglomerular apparatus, is composed of portions of your afferent and efferent arterioles, extraglomerular mesangial cells, and specialized area of the distal convoluted tubule. Sorry. By the way, please note that there is no, what do you call this? There is no podocytes present in this area. Okay, no podocytes that is present in this area accordingly. Okay, you have two actually components of your juxtaglomerular apparatus. You have your juxtaglomerular cells that are located in the afferent arterioles. And yes, these juxtaglomerular cells are modified smooth muscle cells with stretch receptors. And then you have the other one, other component, the macula densa. Your macula densa is located in the distal convoluted tubules, and they are specialized epithelial cells. They are specialized epithelial cells. And yes, what do they do? They sense sodium and chloride concentration in the tubular fluid. They sense sodium and chloride concentration in the tubular fluid. While your juxtaglomerular cells in the afferent arterioles, they sense pressure because again, they have stretch receptors. That your juxtaglomerular cells secretes renin. Okay, it secretes renin. And yes, what are the stimulating factors for the release of renin? You have decrease in blood volume, decreased arterial pressure, decrease in sodium, vascular hemorrhage, or increased plasma potassium. But then the most actually is the most commonly discussed actually is your decreased arterial pressure or decreased blood pressure and decreased or low plasma sodium. Of course, your juxtaglomerular cells, it will sense, okay? It will sense your decrease in blood pressure, while your macula densa, it will sense plasma sodium content. Okay? And so your renin here, let's say, if there is a low blood pressure or if there is a low blood pressure that is detected by your juxtaglomerular cells, it will secrete renin. If there is a low plasma sodium content detected by the macula densa, this is a signal. This is a signal to your juxtaglomerular cells to secrete the renin. Okay? And so your renin will react with angiotensinogen to produce angiotensin 1. Your angiotensinogen, of course, it is present in the circulation. Your renin, it will react with angiotensinogen to produce angiotensin 1. Okay, please note, okay, in this scenario, your renin here acts as both an enzyme and a hormone. Acts as both enzyme and a hormone. Okay, your renin will react with angiotensinogen to produce angiotensin 1. Okay, your angiotensin 1 will travel into the circulation and yes, it will reach the lungs. It will reach the lungs. What happens to this angiotensin 1 in the lungs? It is converted into angiotensin 2 by an enzyme known as angiotensin converting enzyme. Your angiotensin converting enzyme is produced by the lungs. It is synthesized by your lungs. Okay, please note that this specific reaction or process takes place in your alveoli of the lungs. Ang conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2 takes place, it happens in the lungs. Okay? And so your angiotensin 2, this is actually the effector substance. This is actually the effector substance. So what are the effects of angiotensin 2? It will cause vasodilation of the afferent arterioles and constriction of the efferent arterioles. What else? It will stimulate reabsorption of sodium and water in the proximal convoluted tubule. What else? It will trigger the release of aldosterone and ADH. Okay? And so yes, your aldosterone, this one is a hormone. Okay? And so if you try to go back when we talk about when we did your endocrine system, your aldosterone, this one will act on the cells of your DCT. Your aldosterone will act on the cells of your distal convoluted tubule. So what will this do? What is the action of your aldosterone? It will promote sodium reabsorption. Okay, your aldosterone here will promote sodium reabsorption in the distal convoluted tubule. Sodium reabsorption is the action, okay, and uh, your target portion is your DCT. What about your ADH or your antidiuretic hormone or your arginine vasopressin or your simply vasopressin? What is the action? Okay, it will promote water reabsorption. Okay, it will promote water reabsorption. It will act on your collecting duct, the cells of your collecting duct, to become permeable to water. Okay, I- it will act on the cells of the collecting duct to become permeable to water. And yes, this water is reabsorbed. Okay, so the end effect is systemic increase in blood pressure. Systemic increase in blood pressure and systemic increase in plasma sodium content. Okay, if that happens, if there is already an increase in blood pressure and or systemic blood pressure and systemic plasma sodium content, then the secretion of renin will decrease. Okay, the secretion of renin will decrease. Okay, so in relation, of course, to your what they call this, in relation to your nephron, no, your angiotensin 2, the actions of your angiotensin 2 will provide a constant pressure within the nephron. Okay, so that is actually what I've just talked is actually your renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system or your RAC. That is for your glomerular filtration process. I guess that's it for today. We will continue next time. Thank you for making this far. Thank you for making this far. And yes, this has been Gael, reminding you to live fully, love deeply, laugh often, keep learning, and never forget to enjoy the ride. Okay, thank you and see you around.